Big blow to India's Paytm. Paytm slapped with restrictions. Yes, your Paytm usage is impacted. Non-compliance lands Paytm in soup. End of the road for Paytm Payments. How does this affect your life? India Today breaks it down.
So if you've been wondering how the latest restrictions on Paytm has a deep impact on your life and the manner in which you use Paytm, then you have to watch this report. This is a special segment on Paytm and how your life changes from here on. I'm Sneha Mordani. Our top focus is Paytm, and this is our top report. Non-compliance lands Paytm in soup. What happened here was this. RBI imposed certain restrictions on Paytm Payments Bank of India, which will bar the platform from onboarding new customer and limit existing customers from sending or receiving money from their savings accounts after the 29th of February. How does this affect your life? We decode.
It's India's omnipresent payments platform, a fintech giant that's a part of nearly everyone's life. From street vendors to glitzy malls, the familiar Paytm sign is a common sight at establishments big and small across the country. But now, Paytm has just been slapped with a slew of big restrictions. The Reserve Bank of India has barred Paytm Payments Bank from onboarding new customers and limit existing customers from sending or receiving money from their savings account after February 29. The regulatory action is a response to persistent issues identified in the bank's operations as detailed in the audit report by the central bank. After February 29, existing Paytm users will be unable to use credit, make deposits, fund transfers, UPI transactions, FASTag toll payments, bill payments and wallet usage. Paytm says that the new move by the Reserve Bank of India does not affect the existing deposits or balance that users have in their saving accounts, Paytm wallets, Paytm FASTags or mobility transit cards. Users can continue to use this balance event after February 29. Paytm Payments Bank currently hosts over 330 million wallet accounts and has 100 million monthly transacting users. It saw a nearly 20% collapse at the stock market soon as restrictions were announced.
I think it's the same thing. They have grown too fast. Well, I'm not talking Paytm in particular, most of the startups, especially where it is a very highly regulated industry, not like, Zomato or, the Nykas where there is no regulation. Finance is highly regulated, and it's possible that in the path to growing very fast, you might have not had perfect systems or compliances. I think that is what effectively, in my very surface level reckoning, comes out. I don't think there is malfeasance involved. I just think it is too fast of a growth in a highly regulated industry.
From the consumers who have invested in Paytm, have believed in the future of the payment industry of India, for them it's a blow. So what it actually gives us as a perspective is, while the fintech revolution in India has happened, while the UPI revolution in India has happened, there's several compliance and regulatory checks and balances that still needs to be ticked off for us to stay in that big league and become the fintech hub that we want to propose to.
Paytm has responded, assuring it will comply with RBI's demands at the earliest. With Nabila Jamal, Bureau Report, India Today.
This morning we are being joined by Somdatta, founder and CEO Acidus Global Inc. She's going to be telling us about how these restrictions will affect you and me in our life. Thank you so much for your time. Can you tell us what exactly happened, first of all, with Paytm Payments Bank? Give us your take on what's now going to happen to the consumers.
Let me give you some perspective. So what has exactly happened with the Paytm Payments Bank?
Right.
Now, Paytm Payments Bank over time have been receiving a lot of deposits. Therefore, they are supposed to comply with certain sections of the RBI mandate, which they have faulted on for the last 1 year. If you see, RBI sent them a notice in 2022, and they then started doing their external audits and their compliance checks, and Paytm has faltered in that. There are several payment gateways, as you know today. You have Google Pay, which is what I use judiciously because it works very, very globally. There are PayUs and much more. But what Paytm has faltered on is when you receive the end consumer's money, there are several compliances and governance things that you have to be very, very particular about, and that is what they've not complied with. Now, there are two parts to the story. First, for the end consumer, I don't think there is anything to worry. What Paytm is trying to do now is to mitigate the process and tie up with institutional bankers to basically do the UPI transfers like Google Pay does right now, right? Because they also are not receiving the funds. They're just gateway. But from the consumers who have invested in Paytm, have believed in the future of the payment industry of India, for them it's a blow. So what it actually gives us as a perspective is, while the fintech revolution in India has happened, while the UPI revolution in India has happened, there's several compliance and regulatory checks and balances that still needs to be ticked off for us to stay in that big league and become the fintech hub that we want to propose to. So I think from the end consumers, this is just a short period of turmoil, but it will soon kind of mitigate. But there are many options. Go to a Google Pay or PayU. They're very quick in terms of their payment solutions, all integrated with UPI. But from an overall fintech perspective, I think it's a lesson that is learned, and I'm sure Paytm is taking the necessary steps to mitigate this challenge.
So how does this really impact daily transactions? Because that's what on top of the mind of many, in fact, users like me, for example.
What the Section 35A of the Banking Regulation Act talks about is that the RBI has the mandate to ensure that the end consumer is always protected, and whatever payment solutions they're using have the necessary compliances and checks and balances in place. Now, what typically happens is if you just go ahead and swipe your Paytm app, your payments happen very, very quickly. But Paytm banks collect the cash. Right? They're not using a third-party institutional banker's gateway. Now, in Google Pay, what happens is it gets attached to an existing banking savings account of mine through which the transaction happens. So what I'm going to tell the end consumers is that quickly switch to another app, like, a Google Pay or a PayU, which becomes your backup system till the time a resolution is passed. But if you already have cash in your wallet of Paytm, remember what the RBI said. You can still use the money. You're allowed to make withdrawals. The end consumer is protected. You're allowed to make your withdrawals. Whatever cash you have in your wallet, you can use that. Paytm cannot take more cash from you. That is what the mandate and the RBI notice says, that Paytm is mandated not to collect further amounts from the end consumer. But the end consumer is allowed to use whatever they have in their wallet to finish the transactions that they have to do now. So there is no issues with that.
What about the nature of the kind of restrictions that the RBI has put in? What do you have to say about this?
I think one thing I have to give kudos to RBI is that RBI is becoming more and more strict in how the banking regulations are adhered to by non-institutional bankers. And what I mean by non-institutional, like today an SBI versus a Paytm bank, right? These are digital banks. Now, the digital banking ecosystem functions in a very, very different way. And there are several compliance, and I'll give you what that means. For an institutional bank, when it takes the consumer's money, for example, if you and I go and make a deposit in the bank, there are several adherences that a bank has to follow. What percentage of it can be used and so on and so forth. But digital banks do not function like that. They have a little more flexibility in the usage of the funds. However, there are several compliances of how they collect the money, the kind of check book balance, etc. they have to maintain, also the kind of P&L mandates that they have to supply to RBI on a regular basis, which means they have to give full access to the Reserve Bank of India at any given point in time to audit them. Now, if you do not comply with that, and if you do not adhere to that, that's when these regulations immediately come into the picture. RBI did not come suddenly and tell them to do this. They have been following up with the Paytm Bank's ecosystem for over 2 years now. The first notice to them in 2022, so they've given them enough time. See, none of these regulators will take a decision overnight unless there's a scam in place, right? Now, in this case, they've given them the notice. I'm sure Paytm is doing its, due diligence in terms of managing and maintaining its books. But because it's a digital bank, you and I do not have visibility how the money is getting utilized, right? Now, you think about it. You put 5,000 in the Paytm wallet. You're not going to use the entire 5,000 rupees at one shot, right? In case of an institutional bank, you know what is in your savings bank, how much interest did you earn, or is it getting capitalized or used in a certain way? You don't get that visibility in digital banks. Thus, the RBI has to play a much stricter role in managing with the compliances. So the RBI is doing what is necessary to protect you and me as end consumers. So we have to actually support their decision.
What about Paytm now trying to do some sort of a turnaround? Now, we know that the deadline is the 29th of February. Do you think they could find some time, pay their dues and just get out of this trouble?
If I was them, given that I'm a startup founder and, I operate in the startup ecosystem, I would say 30 days is still a good enough time to take action. If you are an organization of that scale and you've been given advance notice, I hope and pray Paytm turns around, not only for the best interest of the consumers and the digital banking ecosystem and the hope of the fintech industry in India, but also for its own self, because there are several people who have placed their bet on Paytm and believe they could be the name for the revolution in the fintech industry. I hope they don't let us down.
All right, I'm going to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your views with us and enlightening us about what this really is about and how it could really impact all our lives.